The Honourable Jackie Munro.
Mr Deputy President, I rise to speak on this bill and point out a couple of problems that I've seen. I've tried to go through the budget papers in as much detail as I possibly can, and I am pretty disappointed with what I found. And there are a lot of questions that this government has to answer about the way that they are spending money. Well, we shouldn't have to wait till estimates hearings. It's not because of us individually here on this side of the House. It's actually the people of New South Wales who deserve to know how their money is being spent by this government. We heard in question time the Minister for Minister for Transport wasn't able to point to a particular budget line item, and the Treasurer didn't want to refer to his particular budget papers, although I do believe he has the correct year this time, so that is welcome. We've seen Ms. Sue Higginson come in to the chamber brandishing the budget papers and noting that there is a massive hole in them. I have to agree that there are lots of holes that bear explanation. So, to start off with, in the environment portfolio and looking at the infrastructure spend, it is pretty concerning. The biggest concern that I have is not just with what was revealed in the expenditure for this year's infrastructure items, but actually the calculation that around $90 million that was supposed to be spent last year, according to last year's budget papers, was in fact not spent. That the numbers don't add up. That significant projects had massive shortfalls of allocated money to actual expenditure, which raises very obvious and serious questions about what happened to that money, what happened to these projects, why these significant delays that led to not just $90 million of budgeted or allocated spend not spent, but that 9 of those line items in the budget have been delayed in terms of their completion date. It's extremely concerning. I can speak to a couple of them. The largest apparent shortfalls of allocated money to actual expenditure include the Great Walks line item, and that includes the Gardens of Stone and Great Southern Walk, which suggested a $23.7 million shortfall in what was originally budgeted for $40 million. So that's over half of what was allocated last year is apparently not being spent. What happened there? The Dorrigo Great Walk, which had a shortfall of $13.9 million, again, a very significant figure when you consider what planning would go into the expenditure of those funds, which is quite an enormous infrastructure project up in Dorrigo. The National Parks and Wildlife Services Infrastructure Betterment Fund projects, that recorded a $9.8 million shortfall. The Meemel Goat Island remediation, a $7 million shortfall. And then the Georges River Koala National Park recording a $6.9 million shortfall in the budget from comparisons this year to last year. What happened to that money? Where does it go? The government is able to last year claim this amazing expenditure on walks, on national parks, on koalas, and yet it wasn't spent. What has happened from that year to this to explain that? And it's not only that these projects, we've got 9 projects delayed in terms of their completion date. We've got almost $90 million, and that was 39.2% of allocated project funding, that $90 million. That is extremely significant. So that wasn't spent, presumably rolled over, but there are significant cuts to a number of the projects when we compare this year's to last year's expenditure. But we now also have no funded koala strategy. That is no longer a line item in this government's budget. So the government talks a big game about the Great Koala National Park, but the reality is that we see shortfalls in funding for the Georges River Koala National Park. We now have no line item related to a koala strategy at all. And the year-to-year funding for projects like Protect Koalas of Southern Sydney will see a dropped from $2.3 million last year to $1.8 million this year. So we're actually seeing a significant fall in projects that aren't very specifically related to the Great Koala National Park. We still don't know what that will actually be. We still don't know how that will be funded. The federal government has not come through. This government has not provided any reasonable source of funds that could possibly deliver what they have promised up in the mid-north coast. It's not just confusing and perplexing, it's extremely worrying when the government goes out on these virtue signalling projects when the reality is we now don't have any funded koala strategy in New South Wales. That is the reality under this government for the environment. When we talk about the larger environment infrastructure budget, we're looking at an $8.7 million cut to that entire budget from last year to this year. So we're seeing less funding for infrastructure projects in the environment. That's something that we, again, who knows if that's actually going to be accurate given that $90 million shortfall that's recorded from last year. Who knows if this year's environment budget can actually be expended as was promised last year, and I'd very much welcome the Treasurer's response to this if he knows the answers. I also note, shockingly, that Beachwatch is no longer listed as an item of expenditure for the infrastructure program in the environment portfolio. Beachwatch, an incredibly popular and incredibly important program that allows people to understand whether the water is safe to swim in, whether there is pollution that they should avoid. Obviously saw a lot of media attention after the rains recently that have these massive outflows of pollution that attracts fish, bait fish, and then sharks. But what about people actually swimming in dirty water, the cost to their own health? We don't know if Beachwatch is going to be continued at all. It's certainly not listed anywhere in the budget papers. So when we're talking about local governments who were very, very concerned in the last couple of years that this government had decided to foist that cost onto local governments, where councillors and mayors were pleading with the government that they could not possibly make up the shortfall, that they couldn't possibly fund this themselves given their other funding constraints. We don't know what's happening with Beachwatch, so that's a huge problem. The things that we are concerned about in specific electorates, Lord Howe Island, there are a number of infrastructure projects that were occurring, the waste management facility upgrade. There was also a marine infrastructure project that was listed. Both of those now have an NA against their allocation. So they were about $24 million combined of infrastructure to Lord Howe Island, which is no longer listed. So again, very much welcome some clarity on that and where that money is now listed, what is happening with those very, very important projects. And when I say they're important projects, these are lifeline projects to the people of Lord Howe Island. Their infrastructure projects are not something that you can delay and just ask people to use different facilities, different roads. These are lifeline pieces of infrastructure that allow resources, food, tourism to move between those two, between the mainland and the island. Certainly the waste management facility upgrade is something that the locals have been crying out for some time. Moving on to the science and technology portfolio, there is the term startups not listed once. The science and technology, the Office of the Chief Scientist and Engineer, not mentioned at all. Investment New South Wales, not mentioned at all. There was literally no understanding of how those entities would be funded, what quantum of funding they would receive, what projects they might be responsible for. It's literally nothing in the budget papers at all. Honestly, it is so irresponsible for a government to ignore science and technology to the extent that this government has. Science, technology, innovation, entrepreneurship, these are the driving factors that the New South Wales economy needs for not only economic growth, but for improved productivity. We've heard from our Shadow Treasurer some incredibly important numbers. I'll give you another. In Australia, 6 out of 10 new jobs are created by small, young companies. Companies that are 5 years or less, and companies that will be likely paying their workers more than older, more established companies. And when it comes to startups, that is particularly true. The Pounder Review, which the government actually commissioned itself, specifically noted that innovative companies, that startup ecosystem, is adding at least $39 billion to our New South Wales economy. That's an enormous figure when we're considering that the state economy is worth, between $700 and $800 billion, that entrepreneurs, startups, innovative founders are contributing so much. They make up just 1.8% of businesses in New South Wales, yet are able to generate that value. They also employ at least 136,000 people. That is more than mining and agriculture combined. It is a huge part of our economy. And when we're talking about future prosperity, and jobs growth, we must be talking about small business. We must be talking about startups. And that's what our coalition team has done today. Our leader, Kelly Sloan, has made a huge announcement that we will be scrapping payroll tax for businesses who have a payroll that is under 1.5 million, which is huge, from 1.2 to 1.5 million, and then also reducing the payroll tax rate. And that is incredibly important for those businesses that are growing quickly. Getting to a $10 million payroll tax rate, that is significant in many ways, but when you consider that startup sector that is proportionally paying its staff higher, they will get to that threshold more quickly, and we should be encouraging them to grow. We don't want to be disincentivizing them to restrict their operations. They should feel confident in employing people, not just relying on AI. AI is obviously good as a productivity measure, but we want people to be employed in these incredibly exciting and impactful startups that are in med tech, that are in ed tech, that are in space, that are in quantum computing. These are the companies that will change the way that we live for the better. They're the companies that will fix the problems, some intransigent problems that we face in our society that are unfixable by means and methods of the way we've been doing things already. Under this government, the Innovation and Productivity Council has been entirely axed. It is the single responsibility of the Science and Technology Minister in terms of his legislative responsibilities is to oversee the Innovation and Productivity Council, and he has decided to axe it entirely with nothing to replace it. That was revealed in budget estimates at the beginning of the year. There's no mention of Tech Central in the budget. There's no cohesive innovation precinct strategy. Tech Central is absolutely floundering. It's supposed to be the centrepiece of this government's approach to innovation. What a fail that has been. Under this government, Fishburners has gone to the wall because there was no willingness to engage with this decades-long institution that has bolstered our innovation economy, that has assisted founders to go global, to become unicorns in this state. The Sydney Startup Hub, as we know, was closed without consultation. It was a complete surprise. And I should just say as well that Fishburners was a not-for-profit operation, and the government still couldn't understand the value of that to diverse founders, to women who receive, I think it's about 2% of VC funding these days. I mean, it's a shocking indictment that this government could not understand the value of these institutions. The minimum viable product grants have been slashed. The Techstars program utterly cut, again something that was supporting diverse and underrepresented founders. South by Southwest Sydney was axed at when this government decided that it was no longer worth supporting. Labor's own innovation blueprint mentions artificial intelligence once Just once. Our state's premier document that is supposed to shepherd us into the future of innovation and enterprise mentions artificial intelligence once in a footnote. It couldn't even make it to the main pages. It is laughable, but it is so serious. The New South Wales Trade and Investment Strategy mentioned data centres, now apparently the pillar of this government's economic growth story. It mentions data centres once, our trade and investment strategy. It's honestly, I'm so often lost for words at the lack of interest of this government in actually getting technology right for our state. The government, as we know, doesn't have a data centre strategy. There is no plan for a data centre strategy, according to Simon Draper, again revealed under questioning during the data centre inquiry. These things would not be known unless the opposition was asking questions of this government that, as I said, it's not just, we don't want to know them for the sake of it. We're not here just to annoy the government. We're actually here to hold the government to account on behalf of the taxpayers of New South Wales who are having their money wasted up against walls that are preventing economic growth rather than enhancing it. Ultimately, this budget does not offer any sort of growth strategy. What we understand on this side of the House is that business, small business, enterprise, innovation, private investment is the key to unlock our future prosperity. New South Wales has gone from first under the coalition in terms of our economic growth to last under Labor in 3, I was going to say short years, but God, they have felt long. They have felt so long when we consider the impacts of the federal Labor budgets on investment and employment, when we consider the ongoing failure of this government to recognise what is so clearly needed, not just for the people in the cities as well. And I'll just make one last mention of the renewable energy zones, because there's a lot of misinformation that's going on about this. We are expanding renewable energy zones in New South Wales. We have announced an urban renewable energy zone where the urban centre of Sydney, of Wollongong, of Newcastle, they could be powering 75% of our own needs in urban areas. That's incredible, and currently it's going to waste. We've got the Ausgrid CEO coming out to support it, Squadron Energy have come out to support it. We are also going to roll out an outback res, so Broken Hill, that area that the Honourable Jeremy Buckingham spoke about. We've got lots of land. We have lots of land that can be used productively for renewable energy generation. I've said it in here before, I'll say it again, electrons are the currency of the future. And if we get this right, we can power a sustainable, an innovative, a productive, prosperous economy. But if we don't get it right, and what Labor is not getting right is that it's not listening to people. It is not recognising the loss of social licence that is preventing the smooth flow of capital into the regions, and they are risking the same thing, exactly the same thing, when it comes to the social licence for data centres. People are worried, people are scared about what it entails. How do we capture value? Do we explore land tax, for example, to capture long-term value that comes out of data centres using particular land? How do we manage water use, energy use, land use? These are very reasonable questions that should be answered by a government that is willing to do the work. And this government is clearly unwilling to do that work on behalf of the people of New South Wales to ensure that investment flows into our state for data centres, for our national and state sovereignty. If New South Wales were a national level GDP, we would be ranked 30th in the world by size. That is bigger than Singapore, it is bigger than the UAE, it is bigger than Israel. It is significant. We can be a global player, but this government's absolute and utter lack of vision puts it all at risk. We are seeing a population that is growing faster than our economy, and that has been true for the last 3 years under Labor. That per capita recession that we talk about, that is why people are feeling the pinch. That is why people are feeling like there is less to go around. There is less to go around under Labor. The Treasurer can talk about, oh, we're growing the economy. That's not useful without context. And the context is that our population is growing faster, that our taxes are going up, that we are not encouraging business and enterprise to locate here in New South Wales and drive jobs and growth. That is what a coalition government will do.
Thank you. Dr.